I hope it's record. Yeah,
It shows.
yeah, okay. And then I called our admin lady yesterday to find out how to save it, and she can in our public folder, so she has access on it to it and make it into a YouTube link. So let's. Wow, more people are coming.
Oh yeah, we've got a big team here. So
Yeah, this is great.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing?
Doing great.
morning, that's Carmela, Michelle, and she's our news director here.
Oh, hi, Carmela.
Hello. I'm sorry, my laptop is not working super well this morning. So you only have me by phone, so you can hear my voice, and you can see a picture where I actually wore makeup in. I never do wear makeup. Now that we wear masks, I don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to do a quick housekeeping and ask everybody to mute themselves if they're speaking right now.
Whoops, even more people are coming.
Well, maybe I'll just get
You're
started.
Okay,
You're
so
gonna record
Rebecca,
it.
can you admit people as well?
No, I can't.
Okay. Um, maybe I should.
Make her host.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Oh, I don't see your name under participants. I don't see Roxanne's name either.
I'm right at the top. I should be. Maybe you can scroll up.
Let's,
I'm not sure.
no, I'm in.
I think it's auto admitting people. Is Zoom asking you to admit each one, Michelle?
I'm admitting them.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's working.
Okay. Well, if I have to admit them, I will. That's not a problem. It's just a click. So.
Okay, well, why don't I just get started and
Okay.
we'll see as it comes. So thanks everyone for joining. December 3rd is the International Day of People with Disabilities. So the Mosaic Committee and I really wanted to, highlight how journalism can work with people with disabilities to, promote self-advocacy and all those types of things. So I've invited Michelle Basil and Roxanne Unilicki. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yulinicki.
Yulinicki. To share this presentation. They're from the Voice of Albertans with Disabilities. So Roxanne is someone who's represented Canada in the Paralympics in South Korea. And she spent her time advocating and volunteering on behalf of people with disabilities. And Michelle is on the board of directors for the Voices of Albertans with Disabilities, and she has a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and a certificate in career development. And so these two wonderful ladies will be sharing a presentation that they made for us. So I'm just gonna start it off by saying thanks so much for coming. And during the pandemic, I know it's tougher to make these things work, but we really appreciate you coming here. And a little bit about our team. Obviously, we're a team of reporters and other news affiliated people, and we want to, make sure we're doing the best job we can to tell the right stories for everyone in Alberta, and that includes people with disabilities as well as a bunch of other groups. So I'll just start it off there and maybe pass it off to you guys.
Okay, hi, I'm Michelle. Before we get started with the presentation, I'm just going to do a land acknowledgement quickly. So we'd like to acknowledge that Edmonton, where we work and live, is traditional Treaty 6 territory. And we also like to acknowledge that the Métis people of Alberta who share a very deep connection with this land. And having said that, we'll actually get started. So, like Rebecca said, Roxanne and I are from the Voice of Albertans with Disabilities, and we both strongly believe this kind of presentation and education is so important for everybody, no matter what the age, no matter what the profession. We believe everyone can benefit from this kind of education. So, okay. So who we are, very quickly, we're a cross disability organization, which means we do these our presentations and our other things across Alberta. So we're Alberta wide, and also we're pan disability, which means we will help people with any kind of disability. It doesn't matter what it is. If we can help them, we will. Okay, Roxanne.
So we're just going to quickly tell you about the presentations we do. We do presentations like this one, as well as in the office, we have an amazing lady, Teresa, who will help people fill out forms like AISH and CPP disability, and all those forms for services that can be a little confusing, as well as we do taxes for free in the spring for people. And lastly, we give accessibility assessments, and our Sam in the office will go anywhere in the province to help people assess whether they're wheelchair accessible or not. So, yeah.
Okay.
So we thought we'd start today with the World Health Organization's definition of disability. We find it the most thorough, I guess. And so I'm just going to read it out and explain to you how it sort of works. So disabilities is an umbrella term covering impairments, activity limitations, and participation restrictions. An impairment is a problem in body function or structure. So for myself, I talk about the fact that I use a wheelchair. So, you know, my impairment would be that my legs don't work, just to extremely simplify it. An activity limitation is difficulty encountered by an individual executing a task or an action. So that would be me using a wheelchair encountering a set of stairs. That would be my activity limitation. While a participation restriction is a problem experienced by an individual in involvement in life situations. So it's whatever's at the top of those stairs, like a family reunion, a job interview, a party. And so it's the participation restriction that's where it becomes emotionally difficult, I guess, when you're being excluded from activities. So.
Okay. And the second part of this definition is disability is not just a health problem. It is a complex phenomena reflecting the interaction between features of a person's body and features of society in which he or she lives, overcoming the difficulties faced by people with disability requires the intervention to remove environmental and social barriers. So what this part is saying is not just the person, it's the environmental barriers that cause the difficulty as well.
And just to give you an idea of the scope, disability covers many conditions, some visible, some not visible. A disability may have been present from birth, caused by an accident, or developed over time. There are physical, mental, and learning disabilities, mental disorders, hearing or vision disabilities, epilepsy, drug and alcohol dependencies, environmental sensitivities, and other conditions. So it's a large scope of people that actually come under that umbrella.
Okay, Sorry, I was admitting someone. Okay.
And so this is me, the nerdy human rights kind of activist person. I love this information. And so in March of 2010, Canada ratified the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And when you ratify a convention, you're saying to the world, we're on it. We do this. This is how we roll, basically. But unfortunately, Canada, although they ratified the convention of March of 2010, they really did nothing about it. So in April of 2019, a special rapporteur from the UN came to Canada and pretty much gave us a failing grade, which is really disappointing for me as a human and somebody who has really worked hard to be a full-fledged Canadian and, represent Canada. It's just really disappointing to hear this. The one thing we did do that we do put in here is we passed the Accessible Canada Act, and it passed royal assent in June of 2019. But unfortunately, the Accessible Canada Act has little power and little teeth, and it really only applies to federally mandated businesses such as banks or the airport, which quite frankly are already pretty accessible. We would love to see this more into the actual communities we live in, and it really doesn't cover that. So that's where we're at.
We're hoping it comes though. Okay, so just some stats on people with disabilities. These are the most recent stats that I can find, and they're from a survey done in 2017, which says 22% of Canadians have identified with having a disability. So that is approximately 1 in 5 Canadians who identify with having a disability that are 15 years old and older. So that's about 62 million individuals in Canada who identify with having a disability. Now, keep in mind, this 22% is on par with the UK and the US, but also this 22% only includes the people that identify with having a disability. There are many people that don't even identify with having a disability. Do you want to give an example, Roxanne? Your parents?
Yeah, well, yeah, for example, I have two parents that definitely have disabilities, and yet they would never claim that sort of title, and more because they compare their lives to me and think, well, what we have is nothing compared to what you've been through. But my dad is legally blind, so but he still would not consider himself a person with a disability. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Okay, so this slide is something that we say in every presentation, so we decided to put it right in our presentation. So disability, it's something to think about, and disability does not discriminate. It exists in every demographic. If we improve the lives if we improve the lives of people with disability, then we may improve the lives with every demographic. And we cover every demographic. We're married, we're single, we're white, we're old, we're young, we're female, all the demographics, education, the race. So if we raise the people with disabilities, we might just help every other demographic.
So we like to talk about activities of daily living, because this is often where a lot of us need support. And this is often an area people don't think about. People don't realize that, taking a shower takes planning and, a lot more effort than maybe, an able person. And we feel that if our activities of daily living can be supported, then it allows us to move on to being educated and employed and married and have kids. And for example, Michelle and I live in a housing co-op. And so there's 30% of the people here live with disability. And so we have one, friend that lives in the building that without this help, she works full time for a bank, but she needs help to get out of bed and to get dressed, and without those simple supports, she wouldn't be working and paying taxes and doing all the things that everyone else does. So those supports are still very hard to find in Canada and in Alberta. And we feel very blessed to live somewhere that provides those kind of supports to daily activities. And we need more of that.
And just as a note, this slide goes with that video that I sent out, same as you. So usually we would be playing the video over this slide or with this slide.
Yeah, I'll send it out again in case anyone
Thank you.
after the meeting.
Perfect. So spoon theory. It's a very good way. This theory is a very good way of explaining our energy levels. And the preface is that everyone wakes up with 10 spoons of sugar, and that's their energy level for the whole day. Oh, excuse me. So I wake up with 10 spoons of sugar most days, not every day, but most days. And by the time I make the bed, get dressed, do my hair, do my makeup, get dressed, getting dressed is a workout in itself some mornings. So by the time I get everything ready to go to work, sometimes I'm left only with 8 spoons of sugar to finish the rest of my day. So by the time I get to work, do my work, and get home, I may only have 1.5 spoons left. So I don't have the energy to tidy up in the evening or do laundry or any of that kind of stuff. I just want to sit in my chair and watch TV and rest because I don't have the energy to do anything else. Is there anything you want to add, Roxanne?
No, I think you did great.
Okay. Okay, appropriate language and behavior. This is especially for you guys.
Well, one of them, we got a couple of slides.
Yeah.
So the first point is we get asked this a lot. Can I offer somebody help? And so what Michelle and I, think is that, we're Canadians, we're Albertans. Of course you offer help. Like, we're helpful people, we're friendly. But there is a certain way that you can offer help. So the first thing is you offer, and if you're told no, you just move on. You've done your good deed in making the offer. Second is if you're told yes, then the question would be how. Because I will tell you that if we're out like on a street by ourselves, we know what we're doing. Even though we might have flipped ourselves out of a chair because there's way too many cracks in the sidewalk, we would know how to tell you to help us. And so it's important to realize that if we're out all on our own in the community, it's more than likely we know how to get somebody to help us. The other thing I like to talk about is the no, because in a university class one year, I had a young man say, well, but what if I ran across somebody and he's in a snowbank and he's shivering? And I'm like, well, did you offer him help? Well, yeah. And he said no. And I'm like, well, just move on. And he's like, well, I can't leave him there. And so Michelle and I think, well, first of all, people with disabilities have a right to be stupid and foolhardy, just like every other Canadian. But secondly, in this conversation, we came to the agreement that if you find somebody like that, you may want to call 911 and call an emergency service who would have the skills and abilities to help us. Because what some people don't realize is those of us that only use parts of our body to mobilize in the world, we're incredibly strong. So if you tried to help somebody out of a snowbank, you could end up in there with them, rolling around. So anyways, that's kind of the advice we give on that.
And person first language. And what that means is you put the person first and then the disability second. Like, I'm a woman with a disability. But lots of times I know Roxanne and we really don't identify by our disability. So is there really a need to point out the diagnosis, the disability? And also it's a lot of, here in Canada, it is person first language, but the UK, I know they don't go by person first language. And there's some people here that don't like person first language. So it's personal choice. And when in doubt, you just call the person by their name. That's all. You just, that's who they are. So,
And it would be useful to ask how they identify.
yeah.
They might say, you know, differently abled, or they might, you know, for Michelle and I, we usually use a functional description. Like, I'm a woman who uses a wheelchair. I never give out my medical diagnosis because I find it's absolutely irrelevant to most people. So I would prefer some sort of functional description.
Yeah, it's a description, a descriptor.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
So the next one is the power of language. And we find that often people use words around disability that sort of imply an emotion, right? So people will say to me, wheelchair bound, right? And that is so not my reality. This wheelchair was the best thing that ever happened to me, because both Michelle and I grew up with our disabilities. And before this, I had full leg braces and crutches, and I literally dragged my body around, which was really difficult. So when I got the wheelchair, I felt free. I could go to the store with my friends, you know, so there's other words that do that as well. Like, I've often heard afflicted, right? Somebody's afflicted with blindness. Well, no, they're just blind. You know, wheelchair bound, confined to a wheelchair, anything that sort of suffers, right? We hear that often. People suffer.
Yeah.
Well, we don't think we suffer. Or if we do, it's, I don't know, it's just our normal. So we don't really, but again, you would leave that up to the person. So if you're like interviewing a person and they say they're suffering, well, then they are. Right. But it's just to realize that not everybody feels like they suffer when they have a disability. Yeah.
Okay. And the last one is so important. Don't make assumptions. And I know we all do it. We're all human, but try not to make assumptions. And I'm just going to use an example to explain this. One of the biggest assumptions people make about me in my life is that when they find out that I'm married, the second question that follows, guaranteed, is your husband disabled as well? And I'm like, he's not. Am I doing something wrong? Should he be? One time I was giving a similar presentation to an elementary school, and I was in the lunchroom having coffee with the teacher, and she asked me exactly that. And I told her, yes, I'm married. And right away she asked, is your husband disabled as well? And I go, no. And she goes, I'm shocked. And I looked at her and I said, I'm shocked you're shocked. Like, there's no rule saying that someone with a disability has to be with someone with a disability. Yeah.
I find it highly amusing, because I'm like, well, then you triple or you double your barriers. Like, why would you do that?
But it does, in some cases it does work. People do find a way, but it's not a rule.
By any stretch.
No. Okay. So here this slide, we've come up with some negative words and phrases that you should not use. So Roxanne, you're up first.
Oh, okay. So some of these you like, handicapped is a word that doesn't get used quite as much, but we still see it out in the community. And the reason we don't like this word is it actually implies begging. It's a charitable sort of, and so the story behind it is there was a medieval king that when his people came back from war, he generously decreed that the war veterans could beg on the streets. That's how because they were disabled when they came back from war and couldn't work. That was his generosity, was to allow them to beg on the streets. cap in hand is sort of, and
Yeah.
and so it's now handicapped, and so we don't like it. Yeah, it's not a word that we think should be associated with us because of the implications of what it means. So yeah, we just thought we'd put that up and hope that I don't actually see the media using handicapped as much as, for the most part, I do see you using people with disabilities, but it's just a good reminder as to why we're moving away from that word.
And I try myself consciously to say accessible parking or accessible washroom stall instead of the handicap washroom stall. It's accessible. So the second one here is special needs. And from the research I've done, the term special needs is meant to be a nice term, but in reality, like it's used in schools quite a bit. And actually, I hear it on TV so much. It's incredible. But actually, what this term does is it excludes the person or child even more. And I could speak from personal experience because I grew up in junior high and high school as a special needs child. And it got me teased more. It excluded me more. I had special classes and I didn't need them, but they put me in special needs. And it was just, I cringe when I hear this term. It's so outdated and so wrong. So what we suggest is, especially in schools and everywhere, actually, call the people what they are. They're children with disabilities, and then they can grow up into, or students with disabilities. Then they could grow up into adults with disabilities. It doesn't what's that word, Roxanne?
Infantilize.
Yeah, the child. It allows them dignity and to grow up into an adult with a disability.
Well, and there's always, we're always talking about what do you call us, right? And this is always a huge discussion. It never seems to go away. And the reason we're promoting people with disabilities is that's the legal term, right? Like we're protected under the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. So that's why we think that's the word we should use, whether it's right or not or accurately portrays who we are. That's just the reality of it. Yes. Yeah. And just, I just wanted to reaffirm that where Michelle and I really struggle with this special needs terminology is that you can't transition to an adult with that phrase. It just becomes more and more inappropriate as you age. And so that's why we'd like to see something. Transitioning to adulthood as a kid with a disability is already hard enough. So it'd be nice not to have the label. All right.
Okay, you're up next.
Oh, I do this. So we like to talk about inspiration porn. Now you can Google that. There's an amazing TED Talk about it. But we find especially like this happens constantly. We don't like this inspiration. It's like the music and how we're portrayed, and we don't want to be inspirations just because we have a disability. We want to be inspiring because we've done something absolutely incredible in the world. And so you'll see if you do any research, and we don't want to be inspiring because we breathe. And often that happens is we're put in these positions where people see us as an inspiration, but we haven't done anything inspiring. We're just living like everybody else. And we do find that the media tends to take this sort of, I don't even know what to call it, uses this sort of framework around reporting on us. And we'd like to see it more from a human rights perspective, as opposed to, oh, these poor people, how can we help them? And it's all so sad. And we don't feel sad. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Michelle? No.
No, you said it all. Okay, the next one is normal and healthy. Well, healthy implies that people with disabilities aren't healthy. Actually, we're probably what, pardon?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, healthy implies that a person with a disability is unhealthy. And that just
Oh,
isn't true.
Michelle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Okay, you go ahead then.
Sorry, but I mean, I mean, I'm sorry. Because healthy means we're healthy, and often that word is
Or
not
unhealthy.
to
I'm
describe
sorry.
us,
I'm
right?
sorry.
Right.
I mistyped. It's supposed to be normal and unhealthy. Um, Unhealthy implies that, of course, we're unhealthy, but we're not. We're people that are healthy. We're not born unhealthy. I had a coworker that always said that he was unhealthy, but he's not. He's was one of the healthiest men I knew. Um, Quite often, people with disabilities take actually good care of their health because they have to. And normal, well, what's normal? Like, can you speak to a little bit on that one?
Well, we see our lives as normal, right? We don't see our lives as being exceptional, and quite frankly, that's what we're striving for when we're out in the world. Is I did everything I could to be normal or to be seen as normal. And so we're just cautioning about how those words are used to describe us. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got the medical diagnosis one.
Yeah, and we already just talked about this slightly, in that we'd prefer to maybe be described more by our functional limitations as opposed to a medical diagnosis, because medical diagnosis is for doctors and it has little relevance otherwise in the world. So that would be lovely to see more of that. Yeah.
And also, I say also in this presentation all the time that, especially on this slide, you change the language, you change the perception. And that's what we're trying to do, is change the perception of people with disabilities into a more
Yeah. And
positive one.
I mean, we're looking at disability from a human rights perspective,
Yeah.
right? Is that we were born this way and there's a social contract that we live under and we have every right to have access. You know, we've achieved all the milestones that everybody else achieves. We went to school. I have a driver's license. I drive a vehicle. Michelle's married. You know, we have pets and stepchildren and all of the things that everyone else has. So.
Okay, the next slide is a really important slide too. It's dignity. I'm just going to read out the second definition because it's my favorite. So, dignity is the right of a person to be valued and respected for their own sake. So, in other words, for their for who they are, not their abilities or anything else, but just for who they are.
And this is what it all comes down to in the end. This is what we're looking for. Trying to change the language is, you know, we're trying to find some dignity. And so we've got a couple of points about dignity. And so I do the first two, right, Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is intention, and this is more, we talk about this more with people with disabilities. Is, you know, you could walk around being offended constantly, really. Or you could look at the intention of the person. So we find, say, that people of an older generation use really inappropriate words to describe us, but that's the words that they knew and they grew up with. And so we say that it's really important to look at the intention of what somebody's meaning, and you can be offended, you can ignore it, or you could teach it, like, you know, treat it like it's a teaching moment and teach what the appropriate language would be. Most of the time I ignore it, right? Because it's not what they're intending. So why spend time there when we're talking about something completely different? And then secondly is the impact. So even though you know that this is what you meant, that may not be what somebody heard. And this is certainly, I find, like a really big deal in society right now with the division. It's like one side saying something and the other is not hearing that. and so it's the impact of your words can be really profound. And so just to give you a simple example that happens to me constantly is I use a manual wheelchair and it's really small and it's sporty, right? It's so that I have maximum mobility when I go outside. And yet I get people saying, hey, you should put a motor on that thing. Now, their intention is to be funny and just to engage me in conversation. And I know the intent is good, but the impact is what I think, well, don't I look like do I not look capable of using this wheelchair? Like, and if I got a motor, then I'd lose use of the arms that I'm still using. Like, so for me, it's kind of, it's a weird thing. Like it makes me feel less able. And yet I know again that they don't intend it that way. So I might have a little smart ass retort to it. But yeah, so just to think about that, the intention and the impact those words might have.
And the last one is risk. Excuse me. And there is dignity in taking risk. And Roxanne and I are so lucky that we had parents that let us take risk. And in doing so, we learned the critical thinking skills that we need and decision skills and all kinds of skills from taking risks to live an independent life. A quick example, I've horseback rode since I was 11 years old, and my mom didn't like the fact that I horseback rode, but she knew it was good for me. And so she let me do it, and I only quit 2 years ago. So it helped with all kinds of decision making skills, and not only that, but the physicality of it, the balance and all that. And even when I fell off a few times, she really didn't want me to go back, but she let me. And I've been riding for a number of years, and out of all those years, I think my mom's driven me only a handful of times. My dad had taken that responsibility to drive me because my mom couldn't stand watching me up on a huge horse. So, but I'm glad she let me do it. You know.
Can I tell my example?
Yes,
Michelle?
of course. Sorry.
Okay. So I was teaching wheelchair skills. We have the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital here in Edmonton. And so one year I went out and I was teaching kids under the age of 12 wheelchair skills. And I had this one little boy who was 8 years old, and I came up to him and I said, hey, we're going to have to teach you how to do wheelies. And he started to cry. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, little boys love my wheels. I mean, they will follow me around the store watching my wheels. And so I thought, this is so strange. Like, to me, an 8-year-old boy would totally want to do wheelies. And it is a skill that you need to be a competent wheelchair user. And so I was like, what is going on? Why is this little boy crying? And it turned out that his mom was afraid that he would hurt himself. Which to me, like, again, as a person who's lived with disability, I think, well, he's already disabled. Like, what more could happen? Now, again, that's a little, I know that I'm older, that it's, you want to protect your kids. But the fact is they need to take risks. It's important. And so in that conversation with mom and the little boy and his older brother, we decided that his older brother could be there when he's learning, to catch him in case he falls. Because you can fall over, and I give all instructions on how to do that too, how to fall, without hurting yourself. But these are risks that kids need to take in order to hopefully live independently at an older age. So, yeah.
So, and barriers. We put up this slide to ask people, you guys, what kind of barriers do you guys see as reporters?
I bet you've done a lot of reporting on AISH this summer.
Yeah. That's one of
We
the.
have done AISH. I think some barriers to reporting are transportation or communication, like finding the people who are affected by the stories. So that could be one. I don't know if there's any other reporters on there who have some input.
So I'll add just a couple of
Yeah.
things because this presentation unfortunately has to be so short. And so it doesn't at all cover the scope of barriers that people face. And so we just want to make sure that we talk about people who are blind. You may or may not realize that people who are blind in Canada rely solely on the CNIB for services, which is a charity, which 70% of their funding comes, I think, from charitable sources. And so if one year we all decided to help people in Puerto Rico because a hurricane wiped them out, people in Canada may actually suffer because there's not as much money available. And those services are essential. The other thing I just want to mention quickly is people who are deaf in our community have very limited access to ASL to help them live their lives independently. And so these are areas that are extremely detrimental to certain populations, and Canada needs to do a much better job on making those services available so people can live with dignity.
And also now with everybody using Zoom, it's really hard to get the print on the screen so people who are deaf can participate in these Zoom meetings. It's a real challenge for that. So that's a new barrier that has come up for them now. And
well, and also, sorry, but just to make a note, masks are a real problem
yeah,
for people who are hard of hearing. And it's a large part of the population, like anyone that's aging. Because I even noticed for myself that I find it harder to hear people when I can't see their lips.
because
And so that's something we really need to think about.
yeah. And
Yeah.
as humans, when we watch each other talk and listen, we watch the whole face. We don't, so we don't just listen. It's facial expressions that add to the language. Yeah. So,
And
but oh, go ahead.
just wanted to add that, during COVID, just because I know this is the big thing right now, is that it's very difficult for us with the orders that come out from the medical system about how to handle this pandemic. We have to interpret everything. They don't, like I find it frustrating. Like there were orders that went out to home care last week that the patients now have to wear masks as well. Well, many of our patients can't put the masks on. They're not patients to us, but
Residents.
Many people can't even put the masks on, and home care is coming in to help them brush their teeth or eat, or so it's like, what, how do we interpret this, which again most of us end up doing. But I have to say, like in the first few months of COVID, I felt like, because I live alone and I literally can't go without help from friends. I rely on friends to help me grocery shop and do some of the bigger things in my life. And so it was like, how do I manage this while still following the rules? Because I'm like kind of a keener and I like to follow all the rules. And so it took a lot of adaptation to realize, where do we fit in all of that?
Yeah, it's been really hard with COVID, with a lot of things, and just the isolation itself is hard. People with disabilities a lot of times are isolated anyway, but we can still have people over, get help, but now it's like no go, like it's really isolating, and that's a huge barrier. Yeah.
Well, we worry about long-term health of everybody, so not just people with disabilities, certainly.
Anything else to add, Roxanne, or no? Okay. Just one little note. Roxanne and I both find that the biggest barrier is attitudinal barriers from other people. So That's one of the biggest ones we run into besides COVID now, but I lost my mouse. There we go. So, and because you guys cannot see us fully, and I know that there's a video with us, but we put this picture in there so you can see us fully. And you can see Roxanne uses a wheelchair, and I use a scooter and a cane there. It shows. So yeah.
And so we like to end on this because, again, we find in society, like we hear people say things like, oh, if I was in an accident and had to use a wheelchair, I'd rather die. And so we just like to end on the fact that we love our lives. We think our lives are fabulous. I was blessed to have had the opportunity to represent Canada in the 1988 Paralympics in Seoul, Korea. Both Michelle and I have post-secondary educations. We found employment a little difficult for various reasons, but it's just important to know that we love our lives and we feel that our lives are normal, you know,
a regular or whatever. And we live our lives and go about things and do things just like everybody else. We might do it a little differently and take a little bit more time, but everything we do and the way we live is really no different than anybody else. I mean, I get up, go to work, have supper, come home. I have a husband, you know. So, and I'm involved in a bunch of different peer groups, and yeah, it's no different. It's busy, but it's no different. Yeah. So that brings us to the end. Is we've got a bit of time, about 10 minutes. So is there any questions from anybody
Is there something we didn't cover that,
you would like us to speak to?
Well, I'll go. I really enjoyed the language part of it. I think that's going to be very useful for us, like with functional descriptions. And you guys clearly can speak to the physical wheelchair person using the wheelchair part of it. I was just wondering if there's any other keywords that you know for maybe people who are blind or people who are deaf. If there's any like functional descriptions that are common that we could take away from this.
Well, the word afflicted, you can not describe it like that. They're just blind, or they have cerebral palsy, or
Well, and I will say I don't see blind or deaf as a medical diagnosis. That is kind of a functional description.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I guess the most important thing is to just ask them how they want to be referred to.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And what I can do, Rebecca, too, is I can send you the links of our research, so you would have a little bit on language.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Is there anyone else on the call who had some questions? I think you guys went over a lot, so you did cover quite a bit there for us.
Okay. And
feel free to unmute if someone has a question, but otherwise I'll just say thank you so much for giving us a presentation. I found it very useful, and I think it's been great to hear from you guys.
Thank you. And also, if you guys do have any other questions, you can email me. I've got it up here on the screen. And
I have a copy of the presentation, so I'll send that out with the videos you mentioned as well to the people on the call.
And also the feedback is very important. There's a SurveyMonkey link to fill out our feedback. And that's so important because we're government funded. So to keep this program, the presentation program going, we need that feedback. We need to show that we're still doing presentations and we're still doing a decent job at it. So
Okay.
I have one sort of question, or just wondering if you guys have heard about something called the PROUD Project. I have a friend, she works out of the University of Toronto, and it's a project that they've just started where they're looking for people to participate in their study.
Okay.
And the focus is on people with visible disabilities and employment. And when
Okay.
you go into like an interview, something like that, and you know, facing kind of that challenge of finding jobs when you have a disability. So they are looking for, I guess, you know, people to do the study. So if you wanted to Google the PROUD Project, the main researcher is Chloe Atkins.
Okay.
She used to be a U of C professor, so I knew her from Calgary, but she's since moved to Toronto.
Okay.
I think it's just a really interesting study that they're
Yeah.
doing. If you want to look.
We'll look that up for sure. That
Okay,
sounds
that'd be-
really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. So is there anything else? Dead silence.
I think that means you covered it all. So thanks so much.
Yes, thank you so much,
Um,
Rebecca.
I'm glad we could set this up. And as they said, there's phones and emails here. If you guys have any other questions that you wanted to give up directly, we were recording the meeting, so we'll make sure to send the recording around as well with the other videos. So we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, Rebecca.
So Michelle, can you, I'm just gonna try and get the recording as well. I hope I recorded it myself, but if you don't have it, I'll connect with you after to see if we can get it.
Okay. I hope I've got it too.
It says it's been recording, so.
Okay. I should stop.